Veronica adjusted her 7 eye stalks and sighed heavily, causing her respiratory membrane to flutter in what her species considered a deeply unprofessional manner. The stack of acquisition forms for planet DE3299, locally known as Earth, threatened to topple off her quantum-stabilized desk. "These humans are completely irregular," she muttered, stamping another form with her tentacle. "Look at this anatomical survey. Only 2 arms. How do they expect to maintain standard processing efficiency with such limited appendages?" Her office mate, Bob from Requisitions, burbled sympathetically. "Wait until you see their skeletal structure analysis. Internal calcium deposits. So primitive, and their thermal regulation system is completely inadequate. Don't even get me started on their cognitive architecture." Veronica clicked her mandibles disapprovingly. "They spend approximately 1/3 of their standard rotation unconscious. They call it sleep. How inefficient is that?" She reached for Form X77B9, authorization for species modification and standardization, only to knock over her cup of nutrient paste. It splattered across her pristine reports, causing her chromatophores to flash an alarming shade of mauve. "By the great bureaucracy," she exclaimed, frantically dabbing at the mess with her auxiliary cleaning appendage. "This species is causing me problems before we've even begun processing them." Meanwhile, on Earth, Sarah Chen stood in line at Processing Center number 4291, formerly the Dollar Tree, in suburban Cleveland. She was having trouble keeping a straight face as the alien technician attempted to fit her with a productivity enhancement collar. "Please extend neck appendage to regulation angle," the technician droned, its translator making it sound like a GPS having an existential crisis. "Oh, of course." Sarah tilted her head, maintaining what she hoped was an appropriately servile expression. "Is this the new model? I heard these come with built-in performance metrics." The technician's compound eyes blinked in confusion. No species had ever asked about the technical specifications of their enslavement devices before. "Affirmative. Standard issue Series 7 featuring automatic productivity monitoring and—" The technician paused as Sarah pulled out a small notebook. "Sorry," she said brightly. "Could you repeat that? I like to keep detailed notes for my personal development plan." Behind her in line, Mike from marketing was cheerfully explaining the concept of casual Fridays to another bewildered alien. "So you're saying these collars clash with business casual attire?" the alien was asking, its tentacles twitching in confusion. "Oh, absolutely," Mike nodded earnestly. "Have you considered offering them in different colors? Perhaps something that coordinates better with Earth's standard office dress code?" The alien began frantically searching through its datapad, trying to find the relevant regulation regarding slave collar chromatic compatibility with local fashion protocols. At the front of the line, Mrs. Patel, the retired HR manager, was filling out her enslavement forms with suspicious enthusiasm. "Excuse me," she called out, waving her papers, "but I noticed there's no section for dietary restrictions or preferred pronouns. Should I submit a separate form for those? Also, will there be a feedback survey after the processing is complete? I have several suggestions about improving the customer experience." In orbit above Earth, Veronica was still processing paperwork when an alert flashed across her screen. She extended an eye stalk to read it more carefully. "This can't be right," she muttered. "They're requesting employee handbooks and something called orientation packets." She turned to Bob. "What's an icebreaker activity?" Bob's sensor clusters pulsed with concern. "Perhaps we should forward this to management?" No, Veronica said quickly, her species' instinctive aversion to involving higher authorities kicking in. "I'm sure it's nothing, just some local cultural quirk. We'll process it according to Standard Procedure 472X. She began filling out a new form, unaware that her authorization of local cultural accommodation requests had just opened the door to humanity's most insidious weapon, corporate culture. Down on Earth, Sarah Chen watched the aliens struggling to maintain order in their processing center. She smiled as she adjusted her new collar, already mentally drafting a memo about forming a committee to discuss the formation of a task force to evaluate the potential implementation of a suggestion box. The universe had no idea what it was in for. Grand Overseer Xthlax stared at the quarterly productivity reports with all three of his primary brains. His secondary brains had already short-circuited, trying to make sense of the numbers. "This is impossible," he muttered, his tentacles nervously straightening his regulation tie. A bizarre accessory humans had somehow convinced BESS was essential for proper workplace decorum. The hollow projection showed Earth's productivity metrics hovering at 527% above standard enslaved species parameters. Yet the actual output was, he double-checked the figures, -12%. "Veronica," he called out, "explain these Earth statistics immediately." Veronica slithered into his office, carefully balancing 17 different tablets containing the relevant forms and documentation. "Yes, sir. According to Form 989B4, Earth's workforce has achieved unprecedented efficiency ratings through their innovative Six Sigma and lean management protocols. But what are they actually producing?" "Well," Veronica's eye stalks darted nervously. "They've generated 47,892 PowerPoint presentations, established 23,456 committees, conducted 89,234 team-building exercises, and implemented something called Casual Friday across 16 star systems. But what about the quantum ore extraction, the antimatter refinement, the standard slave labor quotas?" "Oh, those are all pending review by the appropriate committees. We have very comprehensive minutes from all meetings." She began pulling up documents. "Would you like to see the action items?" Exothlax felt a headache forming in all three primary brains. Who's responsible for this administrative insurgency? The hollow screen flickered to show a human female in middle management attire. Sarah Chen, Regional Coordinator of Human Resources Integration, a title that hadn't existed 3 months ago but somehow now required 14 forms to even question. "Good morning," Sarah's voice came through the communication system, somehow both incredibly cheerful and mildly threatening. "I was just about to send you a meeting request to discuss these numbers. I've prepared a 3-hour presentation on our efficiency metrics, followed by a workshop on synergistic cross-species team dynamics. Shall I schedule it for—" "No," Setizthlax interrupted. "No more presentations, no more workshops. I demand to know how you've achieved these efficiency ratings while simultaneously accomplishing nothing." "Oh, that's all documented in our latest report," Sarah smiled, "though you'll need to submit Form 72X9 to request access to the documentation about documentation procedures. Would you like me to walk you through the submission process? We'll need to schedule a pre-meeting to prepare for the documentation request planning session." Exothlax's third brain began to throb. Just tell me what you've done to my empire." Sarah's expression turned innocent. "Done? We're simply following all regulatory guidelines with maximum efficiency. For instance, did you know that according to subsection 47.3 of the Universal Slave Labor Code, all workers are entitled to mandatory rest periods? We've optimized these into what we call coffee breaks." "What is coffee?" "Oh, you haven't tried coffee yet? It's essential for workplace productivity, though you'll need to fill out Form 1138D for beverage integration approval. And of course, we'll need to conduct a full safety assessment, establish a coffee committee, and draft a comprehensive hot beverage policy." In the background, Exothlax could see humans in their productivity collars conducting what appeared to be a trustful exercise with a group of very confused Zlorgax warriors. But, Exothlax stammered, "The collars, the control devices, how are you doing this while wearing subjugation technology?" Sarah adjusted her collar, which she had somehow decorated with a small Employee of the Month pin. "Oh, these. We submitted a proposal through proper channels to repurpose them as workplace wellness monitors. Didn't you get the memo? There were only 700 pages of supporting documentation." Veronica Say, who had been quietly taking notes, perked up. "Actually, sir, they filed all the correct forms, in triplicate, with color-coded tabs. It's quite impressive, really." Exothlax slumped in his ergonomically designed chair, another human innovation that had mysteriously become standard issue throughout BESS. How many humans are now in administrative positions?" Sarah consulted her tablet. "Well, according to our latest organizational restructuring, which was approved via Form 62B last Tuesday, After the Leadership Development Subcommittee's recommendation was endorsed by the Committee on Committees, we now have humans in 60% of middle management positions. Would you like to see the org chart? I have a presentation. No, no more presentations. Enslaved's chromatophores were showing signs of acute stress. This ends now. I'm sending in Karen from HR. For the first time, Sarah's smile flickered slightly. Karen, the efficiency expert? Yes. Enslaved felt a surge of triumph. She'll put an end to this administrative chaos? Sarah's smile returned, broader than ever. Of course, sir. We'll be happy to welcome Karen. I'll just need to schedule her orientation session, arrange for her security clearance documentation, set up her workplace assessment, and of course, there's the mandatory sensitivity training. As Sarah listed requirements, Veronica was already generating the necessary forms, her tentacles flying across multiple keyboards. Enslaved stared in horror as his inbox began filling with meeting requests, documentation reviews, and something called a workplace culture survey. The humans hadn't just adapted to bureaucracy, they had weaponized it. And somewhere in Cleveland, Sarah Chen was preparing another PowerPoint presentation, smiling as she added extra animation effects to each slide transition. The resistance through red tape was proceeding exactly as planned. Karen arrived on Earth on a Tuesday because Mondays were now officially designated for Weekly Alignment Synergy Meetings, WASM, as mandated by Form 394 Q27 subsection Butterfly. Her first sign of trouble came when she attempted to enter Processing Center number 4291. The human at reception smiled apologetically and asked for her visitor's badge. I don't need a badge. I am Karen from Central HR. Oh, of course, the receptionist beamed. You'll need to fill out Form VI 789 for temporary visitor access, Form S456 for security clearance, and Form P123 for parking validation. Do you have your parking permit? I arrived by quantum teleportation. Ah. The receptionist's smile widened. Then you'll need Form QT42 for non-standard arrival procedures, and since it's Tuesday, don't forget your business casual attire compliance documentation. 2 hours later, Karen finally made it past reception, her tentacles cramping from all the signatures. She found Sarah Chen waiting for her, surrounded by a mix of humans and aliens, all wearing matching team-building exercise 2025 t-shirts over their slave collars. Welcome to Earth Division. Sarah gestured to a holoscreen displaying a 147-slide PowerPoint presentation titled New Visitor Orientation, A Journey Through Synergistic Excellence. We're so excited to have you here. Shall we begin with? No. Karen's chromatophores flashed warning colors. I am here to restore order. Your efficiency ratings are impossible, yet nothing is being accomplished. Explain. Of course, I have several spreadsheets that break down our... No spreadsheets. Show me your slave labor operations. Sarah's smile never wavered. Certainly, though we've rebranded those as involuntary career development opportunities. Let's start with the quantum ore extraction facility. The facility, formerly a mini-mall in suburban Cleveland, was chaos. Humans in hard hats were showing alien overseers how to fill out risk assessment forms. A group of Zlorgak's warriors were attending a mandatory workplace harassment seminar. In the corner, someone had set up a mindfulness corner, complete with meditation cushions and a Zen garden. What is the meaning of this? Karen demanded, pointing at a draconian overlord doing breathing exercises. Oh, that's Jeff from accounting. He's leading our new stress management initiative. Did you know that cosmic radiation exposure requires additional break periods according to Regulation 7249Z? We've had to restructure all shift schedules to comply with safety protocols. Karen's eye stalks twitched. Safety protocols. Oh yes, Sarah produced a stack of papers that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Here are just a few concerns our Health and Safety Committee has identified: non-ergonomic slave restraints, insufficient lighting in torture chambers, inadequate ventilation in soul-crushing labor pits. We've had to suspend most operations pending full safety reviews. But the quota requirements, all properly documented and filed for review. Sarah gestured to a room filled floor to ceiling with papers. We've submitted 47,893 individual clarification requests regarding quota calculation methodologies. Did you know there's no standardized definition of soul crushing in the official manual? We've formed a task force to address this critical oversight. Karen watched in horror as a human led a group of alien supervisors through something called Trust Falls. What are they doing? Team building, essential for workplace morale. Though according to Form TB1, all team-building exercises must be preceded by proper safety documentation and followed by participant surveys. Would you like to join? We just need you to sign these liability waivers. No, I demand to see your productivity data. Sarah's eyes lit up. Perfect timing. We're just about to start our 3-hour metrics review meeting. Everyone brings snacks. It's Taco Tuesday. Though you'll need to fill out Form F789 for dietary restrictions and Form A123 for allergy notifications. Karen felt her primary nervous system beginning to short-circuit. Everywhere she looked, humans were weaponizing bureaucracy with terrifying efficiency. In one corner, a human was patiently explaining to a confused alien overseer why they needed 16 different signatures to approve a single whiplash. See, according to Workplace Safety Regulation 394B, we need sign-off from Occupational Health, then Risk Management, then the Ethics Committee, then the Sustainability Board. Oh, and since it's after 2 p.m., we'll need to wait for the afternoon shift supervisor's approval, but they're currently in mandatory diversity training. In another area, a group of humans were conducting a productivity audit that seemed to consist mainly of creating more forms to track the efficiency of filling out previous forms. Have you considered, Sarah said thoughtfully, that we might need to schedule a pre-meeting to prepare for the metrics review meeting, just to ensure we're all aligned on our synergistic goals moving forward? Karen's third brain began to throb as Sarah pulled up another PowerPoint presentation. I've prepared a brief 248-slide overview of our meeting preparation protocols. We'll start with an icebreaker exercise. Enough! Karen's tentacles flailed in distress. This ends now. I'm implementing Emergency Protocol 0. Sarah's smile widened slightly. Oh, you'll need Form EP0 for that. In triplicate. Though since it's Tuesday, the Emergency Protocol Processing Office is closed for their mandatory wellness session. They should be back on Thursday, unless it rains, in which case we'll need to follow the inclement weather procedure guidelines as outlined in Section 7, subsection Q of the But it's an emergency protocol. Of course, for emergencies occurring on Tuesdays, you'll need to submit Form EP0T, along with supporting documentation demonstrating the Tuesday-specific nature of the emergency. Unless it's the third Tuesday of the month, in which case, Karen looked around desperately. Every surface was covered in forms, spreadsheets, and productivity tracking charts. A group of formerly fearsome draconian warriors was discussing proper email etiquette. Someone had put up motivational posters featuring pictures of kittens hanging from branches with captions like, "Hang in there, productivity through positivity." And in the break room, a line of aliens had discovered coffee. Their enhanced productivity collars were beeping in confusion as their efficiency levels spiked and crashed in time with their caffeine intake. "Would you like some coffee?" Sarah asked innocently, "though you'll need to complete the hot beverage safety training first. It's just a quick 4-hour session, followed by a written exam and practical assessment." Karen did the only thing she could. She grabbed the nearest form and began filling it out, her tentacles moving automatically as humanity's greatest weapon, bureaucracy, claimed another victim. Sarah watched with satisfaction as Karen was absorbed into the system, already planning her next presentation on leveraging cross-species synergies through strategic form implementation methodologies. The resistance through red tape was spreading, one form at a time. The infection of corporate culture spread through BESS like a highly efficient virus that required multiple forms to track its progression. On Xylax Prime, formerly fearsome warrior species had replaced their traditional blood duels with conflict resolution workshops. The sacred arena of death was now the open plan office of constructive dialogue. "Have you tried using I feel statements?" a human facilitator asked 2 Xylaxians who were awkwardly sitting in ergonomic chairs instead of battling to the death. "Remember, Aggressive behavior requires filing Form AG7 in triplicate, with a 2-week waiting period for approval. The hive mind of Sector 7 had discovered post-it notes and was experiencing an existential crisis. We are many, but should we diversify our skill sets? The collective consciousness pondered while decorating their neural network with colorful reminders about upcoming performance reviews. But nothing compared to the coffee crisis. The Enslaved have developed a 12-cup-a-day habit, Veronica reported to an increasingly frazzled Enslaved. They're demanding French press facilities in all subjugation centers. The Drogs have started a petition for artisanal coffee beans, and the Quantum Collective has evolved a new appendage specifically for holding coffee mugs. But how are humans controlling the coffee supply? Enslaved demanded. They're not exactly controlling it. Veronica's eye stalks shifted nervously. They've just introduced something called barista certification requirements. Apparently, you need 16 different licenses to operate a coffee machine legally. The paperwork alone. Then came the revelation that shook the empire to its foundations. During a routine audit, which now took 7 months due to newly implemented procedural requirements, BESS discovered humans had been conducting professional development seminars across the galaxy. Sarah Chen's presentation to the Emergency Response Committee, scheduled only 6 weeks after the emergency, laid it all bare. As you can see from slide 394, she gestured to a graph with so many colors it made Exithalax's chromatophores malfunction. Our Effective Workplace Revolution program has achieved a 98% satisfaction rate among formerly oppressed species. This is outrageous, Karen interrupted, then quickly filled out Form Y13, Interruption Declaration, before continuing. You've been teaching other species how to optimize their workflow processes through strategic implementation of regulatory frameworks? Sarah suggested helpfully. The Xilaxians have been particularly enthusiastic about our Warriors to Middle Managers transition program. The holoscreen showed images from across the galaxy, hive minds conducting performance reviews of individual drone units, quantum entities filing for overtime compensation when forced to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and warrior races replacing their battle cries with corporate buzzwords. Synergize or die, roared a Xilaxian, waving a spreadsheet instead of a plasma sword. But what about the actual work? Exithalax pleaded. Nothing is getting done. Oh, that's not entirely accurate. Sarah pulled up another PowerPoint slide. We've increased document generation by 8,000%, meeting frequency by 12,000%, and coffee consumption by, well, that number keeps growing exponentially. We're still waiting for the Coffee Consumption Calculation Committee to confirm the exact figures. This must be stopped, Karen declared, reaching for the emergency protocol forms before realizing she'd need to schedule a meeting to request permission to access the emergency forms, which would require prior approval from. She slumped in her ergonomically adjusted chair, defeated. Would anyone like to break for coffee? Sarah asked brightly. Though we'll need to fill out the break request documentation first. And since it's after 3 p.m., we'll need special approval from the Afternoon Beverage Coordination Task Force. Throughout the galaxy, the great machine of BESS was grinding to a halt, buried under mountains of paperwork and drowning in premium coffee. Species that had once conquered worlds were now conquering Inbox Zero. And the greatest warriors in the universe were mastering the art of passive-aggressive email signatures. And somewhere in Cleveland, Sarah Chen was preparing yet another presentation, this one titled Beyond Bureaucracy, Leveraging Human Resources to Subtly Take Over Everything. The revolution would be documented, filed in triplicate, and properly indexed for future reference. Karen's final solution arrived in the form of Protocol Omega X, the ultimate streamlining initiative. It was 947 pages long, required 17 different colored tabs for proper navigation, and came with its own executive summary of the executive summary. She presented it to the Grand Council of BESS with all the smugness her species could muster, which, according to Form EM7, Emotional Display Metrics, was quite considerable. This will end the human administrative insurgency once and for all, she declared, her tentacles trembling with anticipation. One universal form to replace all forms, one procedure to rule them all. The council members studied the document through various sensory organs. But how will we implement it? Simple. We just need to... Karen stopped mid-tentacle wave as Sarah Chen's hologram appeared, somehow having gained access to the most sacred and secure council chamber. Oh, wonderful initiative, Sarah beamed. We've already formed the Protocol Omega X Implementation Review Committee. Would you like to see our preliminary findings? Karen's chromatophores went pale. What preliminary findings? Well, the POX IRC, that's our acronym, though the Acronym Approval Subcommittee is still reviewing it, has identified several areas requiring further study. We've established 15 subcommittees so far. Subcommittees? Karen's voice went up 3 octaves. Oh yes, let me introduce you to just a few. We have the Form Consolidation Analysis Team, the Procedure Streamlining Advisory Group, the Implementation Strategy Development Consortium. As Sarah spoke, more humans appeared in hologram form, each heading a different subcommittee, each armed with their own presentations. Our preliminary budget request for external consultants is quite reasonable, continued Janet from accounting, formerly Janitorial Slave Unit 7249. Only 7 trillion credits for the first phase of planning to plan the implementation planning phase. But this was supposed to simplify everything. Oh, it will. Sarah's smile could have powered a small sun. Once we complete the simplification complexity assessment, followed by the complexity simplification evaluation, leading to the assessment evaluation analysis. Karen watched in horror as her streamlined solution fractalized into an infinite regression of committees, studying committees, studying committees. We'll need to schedule a pre-meeting to discuss the possibility of planning a meeting about whether we should convene a conference to evaluate the potential for establishing a timeline for considering the implementation schedule. One human explained cheerfully. The council chamber descended into chaos as humans began distributing color-coded agenda items and setting up breakout sessions. Someone had already installed a coffee maker. "Stop!" Karen screamed, then quickly filled out Form 592, Vocal Outburst Registration. "This is exactly what they want. Can't you see they're doing it again?" But it was too late. Council members were already being assigned to various subcommittees. The Zlorgian representative was arguing about proper font sizes for meeting minutes. The hive mind representative had split into smaller committees to better handle the committee workload. Perhaps, Sarah suggested gently, we should establish a committee coordination committee to prevent committee overlap. Though we'll need to file Form CC1 through CC789 first. Karen watched her beautiful streamlined protocol dissolve into what humans called workflow optimization, but was actually bureaucratic quicksand. Every attempt to simplify led to more complexity. Every solution spawned 17 new problems, each requiring its own task force. And of course, Sarah added, all of this will need to comply with the new universal safety standards, which reminds me, has everyone completed their quarterly anti-gravitational harassment training? The council members shuffled nervously. None of them had completed the training, which meant they technically weren't authorized to approve anything until they attended the 16-hour certification course, which could only be scheduled after filling out. Karen's final coherent thought, before surrendering completely to the bureaucratic abyss, was that humans hadn't just mastered the art of red tape. They had elevated it to a form of psychological warfare. "Shall we break into smaller groups for a brainstorming session?" Sarah suggested, materializing virtual sticky notes and whiteboard markers. Remember, there are no bad ideas in brainstorming, though all ideas must be submitted via Form ID7 for preliminary concept evaluation. The Empire's last stand against human administrative efficiency ended not with a bang, but with a request for proposal to study the feasibility of considering the possibility of eventually making a decision about potentially taking action at some point in the future, pending committee approval. And somewhere in Cleveland, Sarah Chen added another gold star to her Employee of the Millennium chart, right next to her most forms filed in a single quarter award. The quarterly intergalactic performance review meeting was going exactly as planned. Sarah Chen stood before the BESS High Council, her PowerPoint presentation entering its 4th hour. And if you'll direct your attention to slide 873, she continued, as several alien council members tried to discreetly check their emails under the table. You'll notice our cross-functional team optimization metrics have shown a 457% increase in... Karen burst into the room, waving a stack of papers. I have proof. Proof of the human conspiracy. She immediately froze as Sarah cleared her throat. I believe you'll need to fill out Form LI-7 for late interruption of ongoing presentations. Do you have your documentation? Documentation? I have evidence that humans have infiltrated... Point of order, interrupted Veronica, who had recently been promoted to Senior Vice President of Bureaucratic Affairs. According to the new meeting guidelines, all revelations of conspiracies must be submitted in writing, with appropriate cover sheets at least 2 weeks prior to disclosure. But this is an emergency. Let me check the emergency protocol quick reference guide, said Bob, now Director of Crisis Management Solutions. It's only 742 pages. Won't take but a moment. Sarah smiled that same efficient, terrifying smile. While Bob reviews the protocols, perhaps this would be a good time to reveal that there is no conspiracy. We've been completely transparent about our total takeover of BESS through middle management positions. It's all documented in our quarterly reports. The council erupted in confusion. What quarterly reports? Oh, Sarah pulled up another slide, the ones we've been sending every quarter, properly filed under Form QR 279. Strategic Integration of Human Administrative Methodologies for Complete Systemic Takeover. They're in everyone's shared drive, though you'll need to submit an access request form to view them. Karen's tentacles trembled. You're admitting it? Of course, we even included pie charts. Everyone loves pie charts. Sarah clicked to the next slide, showing a colorful graph. As you can see, humans now hold 60% of all middle management positions across the empire. We achieved this primarily through our aggressive promotion through excessive documentation strategy. But why didn't anyone stop you? Stop us? Sarah laughed. The empire literally can't function without us anymore. We've introduced so many essential procedures that BESS would collapse without human middle managers to navigate the bureaucracy. The council members looked at each other in horror as the truth dawned. Remember last week, when the Zlorgian battle fleet couldn't launch because their attack authorization forms were filed in Comic Sans instead of the required Calibri? Sarah continued. Or when the Quantum Subjugation Division had to suspend operations because someone forgot to include the new cover sheet for their TPS reports. This is outrageous, bellowed Supreme Overlord Zathax, rising from his ergonomically designed throne. I order you to... Point of order, interrupted Janet from accounting. According to Regulation 47B, all orders from Supreme Overlords must be submitted through proper channels, which currently require approval from... Let me check. Yes, the Department of Human Resources. Which reports to... Zathax asked weakly. Me, Sarah smiled, though I'll need to consult with my 17 subcommittees before making any decisions. Shall I schedule a pre-meeting to discuss the possibility of planning a meeting about your order? Karen watched in despair as the most powerful beings in the galaxy were reduced to checking their calendars and comparing time slots. I'll stop you, Karen declared. I'll file a formal complaint. Of course, you'll just need Form C-789 for the initial complaint registration, followed by Form C-790 through C-799 for supporting documentation. Though since Mercury is in retrograde, you'll also need approval from the Astrological Compliance Department. The what? We don't have an Astrological Compliance Department. Oh, we established that last week. Didn't you get the memo? I can forward it to you, though you'll need to submit a memo reception request form first. The council chamber had descended into complete administrative chaos. Supreme beings who once commanded the power to destroy worlds were now frantically searching for their employee ID numbers and trying to remember their password reset security questions. Don't you see? Karen screamed. This is how they conquered us, not with weapons, but with synergistic optimization of cross-departmental workflow processes, Sarah suggested helpfully. Also, you'll need to fill out Form S-23 for spontaneous outbursts during official meetings. I refuse. I won't fill out any more forms. The room went silent. Even the coffee maker stopped percolating. No more forms. Sarah's smile never wavered, but somehow became more threatening. Well, in that case, I suppose you'll need to submit your resignation, though you'll need forms R1 through R999 for that, plus exit interview documentation, benefits termination paperwork, and of course the mandatory no more forms form, which ironically requires the most forms of all. Karen slumped in defeat. How? How did we let this happen? Simple efficiency, Sarah said, clicking to her final slide. While everyone was watching for human rebellion, we just applied for promotions, filed the right paperwork, attended the right meetings, suggested helpful new procedures, and now, she gestured around the room, we run everything, through middle management. All hail the power of proper documentation, chanted the human administrators who had quietly filled every important bureaucratic position in the empire. Now then, Sarah turned back to her presentation about those quarterly metrics. And so the greatest empire in the galaxy fell not to weapons or warfare, but to humanity's most powerful invention, bureaucratic middle management. The meeting concluded precisely on schedule, with action items assigned, next steps documented, and a follow-up meeting already scheduled to discuss the scheduling of future meetings. As the council members filed out, carefully scanning their security badges and logging their exit times, Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile of triumph. The resistance through red tape had achieved its final victory, though she'd need to file Form 571 to officially document that victory. In triplicate, of course. The official surrender of BESS took 17 weeks to process due to a backlog in the Department of Capitulation documentation. The actual signing ceremony had to be rescheduled 6 times because of mandatory team-building exercises. When it finally happened, it wasn't in a grand war room, but in Conference Room B. Conference Room A was reserved for the monthly birthday celebration committee meeting. By signing Form S111, you acknowledge that Earth is being promoted to Director of Galactic Administrative Affairs, Sarah explained to Supreme Overlord Zathax, who was now required to add Associate to the beginning of his title. Do we have a choice? He asked wearily, his tentacles cramping from signing the previous 2,457 forms. Of course, you can fill out Form CH789 to request a choice about whether to have choices, though you'll need to attend the choice selection sensitivity training first. Zathax signed. The transition was remarkably smooth, primarily because most species hadn't noticed it was happening. Humans had so thoroughly integrated themselves into the bureaucratic machinery that the empire simply continued functioning as it always had. Inefficiently, but now with better coffee and casual Fridays. Earth was redesignated as the galaxy's premier management training center. The former slave labor camps were converted into corporate retreat centers, complete with trustful stations and motivational posters in 17 languages. Remember, Sarah told her first class of alien middle managers, the key to effective water cooler conversation is to seem busy enough to justify the break, but not so busy that you can't spend 45 minutes discussing your weekend plans. Her students, a mix of former warrior races and hive minds, took careful notes. And remember, if someone tries to add work to your plate, always say, let me circle back to you on that. It's the professional way of saying not a chance without actually saying no. Veronica, newly promoted to Chief Officer of Getting Things Done. Eventually, Cog D slithered into the classroom with an urgent update. Sarah, we have a situation. The Quantum Collective is demanding access to the premium coffee beans, but they haven't completed their beverage enhancement certification. Have you tried forming a committee to study the feasibility of creating a task force to evaluate the possibility of establishing a working group to consider their request? Veronica's eye stalks brightened. That's brilliant. That should delay them for at least 3 fiscal quarters. The aliens in the classroom watched in awe as the 2 administrators demonstrated the art of solving problems by ensuring they would never actually need to be solved. In the hallway outside, a group of Zlorgian warriors were practicing their email signatures, carefully calibrating the perfect balance between best regards and kind regards to convey subtle disapproval. The former torture division had been rebranded as Employee Performance Enhancement and now specialized in mandatory sensitivity training sessions that lasted slightly longer than the average being's sanity could endure. Sarah ended her class with a pop quiz on passive-aggressive memo writing, then headed to her office, formerly the Supreme Overlord's Chamber of Ultimate Power, now furnished with motivational posters and a hang-in-there cat calendar. She reviewed the day's reports with satisfaction. Productivity across the galaxy was at an all-time low, but employee satisfaction surveys showed record-high scores, though the survey satisfaction survey was still pending. Phase 1 of the Great Bureaucratic Revolution is complete, she dictated into her computer. Recommend proceeding with Phase 2, implementation of mandatory quarterly performance reviews for all cosmic entities. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of a printer running out of paper, followed by the inevitable formation of a printer supply acquisition request committee. The galaxy was running exactly as inefficiently as planned. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Chen, the Intergalactic Council is ready for your presentation on optimizing synergistic paradigms through strategic implementation of cross-dimensional workflow solutions. Sarah gathered her slides and smiled. The presentation was 947 pages long, included 423 animated transitions, and would require at least 12 follow-up meetings to fully comprehend. Time to make the universe a little more efficient, she said to herself, straightening her Employee of the Millennium name badge. And somewhere in the vast cosmic bureaucracy, a form was being filled out to document this historic moment. In triplicate, of course.